Hi, everyone. Welcome to the I Am Real Estate Show. You're here with Ray Smith, and Danielle Johnson is not here today. I'm here with Sandra Johnson, the mom, my wife. And we're here today on the show. We have Don Geisler from Indy Realty. Don is our boss because we belong with Indy Realty also. He's the CEO and founder of this local Tucson company. This company was built in Tucson.
That's right. Tucson born and bred.
He's also the designated broker of Indy Realty. How you doing today, Don?
I am doing great, and I appreciate you guys having me on as always.
Hey, I know we have like this agenda, but it just dawned on me that we haven't talked since the big block party.
We have not. So what day was that? It was April 20, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we at Indy Realty had a massive block party, and we had food trucks there and a bunch of vendors and people coming and going all day, and it was just wonderful. And Tucson Appliance was there, and the Tucson Sugar Skulls were there, and they gave away a whole bunch of stuff, and we are so grateful. I know Tucson Appliance, Chris Edwards, gave away a wine cooler that was just awesome.
Yes, I saw that.
It was awesome. The Sugar Skulls gave away tickets for 4 to any game that the winners chose.
Nice.
And we had so many vendors, and everybody had such a great time.
I thought the food trucks were pretty great, too.
It was a really good time.
Good food.
And, as always, we don't do that every day, but we'll do that again. But every day, we just want to welcome people in. We're at 7255 East Tanque Verde Road, Indy Realty, of course, and our doors are open to the public here in Tucson all the time.
I have to say, too, we had some nonprofits there. And we did have one of my favorite nonprofits, Reach for the Stars.
Awesome.
And had some solar gazing going on.
That's Reach for the Stars. And for anybody listening, these people are fantastic. And I can tell you, they brought the telescope with the solar lens. And you could sit there and stare at that for just hours. You can just get lost in it. Like, we were looking at the sun, and you could see the surface, like solar flares and the boiling surface of the sun.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just so fascinating, and we're just so appreciative of them coming out. And boy, is that fun! It made me. I was sitting out looking at the stars the other night, and I'm like, oh man, I got to break out my telescope again. It was just so fun.
Yeah, I think we forget how awesome the universe is, and sometimes you have to stop and smell the roses, but sometimes you gotta stop and look at the sky. You
do, and life is good, and the sky is beautiful, and again, life is good.
So we consider that a great event, a successful event at the block party then on April 20th?
We did. I mean, literally, we had hundreds of people come through, and it was just wonderful. There was music, and it was it was boisterous, and people were having a great time, and we appreciate everybody that did come, and there are just too many people to thank it right now, but it was wonderful.
I just like everyone to know that not only do we have our clients come in, we also had other realtors come in and take a look at it. We had people from down the neighborhood come around and take a look. It was just a great array of people came to come visit.
It was so gratifying because, I was out one day just kind of cleaning up the parking lot, and some folks were walking through one morning right before we actually opened, and they were kind of, chatting with me about cleaning up, and I said, we have a big event going on. We want to make sure that the place looks great. And they live in the neighborhood behind us. They said, oh, yeah, we got your postcard. It's on the fridge and on our calendar. And
that's awesome.
It really is, because it is so special to us to be viewed as an important and respected and trusted part of the community.
Yes.
And that's really what we're all about. And, I always tell people when they come over and they say, well, Don, tell me why I should join Indy Realty. And I'm like, we didn't open this company to be a niche. We opened the company to be the trusted name in real estate in Tucson and Southern Arizona. And so we love when people just are toddling by in the community, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll be here, we want to come check you guys out.
I love it when people say, oh, we saw your sign, like they think we own that sign.
Right.
And it's like, we love the name recognition though that's going on, and people asking about the name being Indy.
Yes, and that it's so important to me because Indy is short for independent, so we feel just very strongly. First off, freedom is my core value, and independence. I think not only do real estate professionals value independence, but I think that the public, really values independence, and that is what we stand for. And so if anybody's ever wondering, Indy is indeed short for independent.
I think the thing I like to remind people is that it's the uniqueness that we have, and that's why we're independent, and we're there, and we want everyone to come. The things that you do, offering, the other things you offer for clients and other agents, little things like, if you're a single mom and you want to be a realtor, we think we have a place to help you where you can have watch your kids while you're still trying to do those things to what is make a living for your family. I mean, you do so much to make sure that it's a whole family atmosphere. Even when you come into work every day, you feel like it's part of the family, not only the community, but family.
Yeah, and that's real important to us, and I appreciate it. And it was important when we set out the model and we designed the facility, was we want our agents, our professionals who are also parents, to not feel like they can't do the job, to be able to do the job. And so, yeah, it's all about family. I mean, it really is.
Sorry, I was just laughing to myself. Listen, when I've said we have childcare, don't mean you're gonna bring your kid and leave them there and then go show houses. You got it's just you're coming to do work. And you need a place to go come.
It is
take care of your
Indy
paperwork.
Realty. It is not actually a child.
I just thought about that, so we better clear ourselves up. Oh,
yeah,
they got
it is
childcare
a
there.
real estate company, but yeah, I appreciate you guys pointing it out. Independence is very important, and when we love the logo and we love the feedback and the acceptance that we get from the logo, and for me, when we were with our professional designer, that 13 stars for the original colonies, the spirit of independence is what I just insisted. I said, this has to be part of the logo. And our designer just came, plugged it in, and it's fantastic.
We should have a class about what the actually emblem means. So, why you have the building, why you have the house right there, why red, black, and white, There should be a little class in one of the meetings.
Nobody's going to that class. I'm sorry, Ray. Nobody's going.
I'll just come by the office and you and I'll talk about it.
That's right. Well, I could talk about it all day, as you can tell. So, independent houses and 13 stars, it's all about independence, and that's what we value. And we think being independent, yet being amazingly professional, being leaders in the industry and doing things the right way, we feel like we can do all those things.
So if you're looking for a broker or you're looking for a real estate agent, where can they find us at?
So we are at Tanque Verde in Sabino Canyon, across the street from Udall Park. We're at 7255 East Tanque Verde Road, and our phone number is 777-8973.
Say that
One
again?
more time.
Yeah.
777-8973. It almost jumped out of my head for a second, believe it or not, but that happens to me all the time.
Well, how often do you call the office? You are the office.
Yeah. So how do they reach you guys, Raymond?
Well, they can reach me at 520-904-7711, and they can reach Sandra at
520-850-1725.
And you can reach Danielle Johnson at 520-373-6864. It's right there.
Yeah, we have right there. Now, our office line was not up there, so I did had to access the brain cell really quick, so that it's printed on.
You're listening to, we're here with Don Geisler, the designated broker and owner of Indy Realty, a local company built and bred in Tucson, Arizona. We are the Johnson Smith team, part of Indy Realty. We're back. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope it's a beautiful Saturday out there, and I hope it's sunny as heck out there, and I hope it's not over 100 degrees. Right now, it's 47. I'm talking about Alaska. In Alaska. You're listening to the I Am Real Estate Show, Ray Smith and Sandra Johnson. We're here with our designated broker of Indy Realty and also the owner of Indy Realty, Don Geisler.
Hello. Appreciate being on.
Don, I thought we go down some real estate issues and talk a little bit about appraisals.
Yeah, I think it's relevant to talk about appraisals. The appraisal is part of the transaction process, and appraisals are a fact of life. And when you have an increasing market, a lot of time, and a seller's market and property being in demand, sometimes we just see that the demand outpaces the comps,
right?
To catch up. So, for example, if a couple of houses close in the area and they're at $300,000, and the next one we list at 310 or 320,000, and there's a ton of demand for it, and there's competition, and it gets bid up to that 320 or whatever, But then an appraiser comes in and all the most recent comps say 320, then you get kind of stuck,
Yeah.
because the one thing that's extremely hard to quantify is market demand. And the appraisers are looking at, here's what the most recent comps say, and your property value is mostly dictated by what the most recent comps say when you talk about a market value approach appraisal.
Yeah, and I think as agents, we tend to look forward where we have appraisers looking backward. So we're anticipating what the market, where it's going. We go, well, if your neighbor sold for 300 and we know that there's a lot of demand, then we should be able to price you a little bit higher than that. And yet appraisers are not, I mean, they do take into consideration the market
Appreciation stuff like that.
trends,
Yeah, the trends.
but they are looking backward.
Yeah, and they're required to. And I think that's so very, very well put, and appraisers are bound by principles, just like any professional
Mhm.
is out there. And, an appraiser who is not diligent and careful, that appraisal goes through the underwriting at the lender,
Right.
and it can be overridden. And because the underwriters at the lender can say, how is this thing appraising for 320 when these three just closed for 300? And then the appraiser gets called on the spot, and they can be professionally damaged, by such a thing. So they have to do it the way that they're taught and the way that their principles are in place, and they are held accountable. There is oversight on their appraisals. And so, yeah, we have this built-in dichotomy of people looking forward and accounting for market value, and the people that are establishing the value are looking backwards at the most recent sales.
Right.
And you run into problems.
I remember someone telling me that I can't remember who, but the appraisal is not really the price of the house. It's what the bank is willing to say, hey, this is, if something happened to the house, we want to be able to get this much money back for our house.
That's right. And so it's a backstop for the lender, and it's the definition of the appraisal is a subjective opinion of value in that given moment. And, right in that, it's subjective. And so different people can see it different ways. And where we get hung up is it may very well be one person's subjective opinion of value, but once it is put together and reported and sent to the lender,
Yeah.
it's now in the lender's mind, that's the value of the house.
Right.
And so they are going to lend based upon that. And so, our Arizona purchase contract gives the buyer the opportunity to cancel because the lender is only going to lend based on the appraised value or the purchase price, whichever one is lower. And so our Arizona contract allows for the buyer to cancel the contract and get a refund of their earnest money if it doesn't appraise.
And right now, I know we're in the trenches. So when we get to the, as we're walking our clients through the transaction, and I'm thinking mostly on the seller side because we're a little more listing agents sometimes than we have buyers, but we're walking them through the transaction, and you get through negotiating price, and then you get through negotiating repairs, and you feel like the worst is behind you.
And here
But
it comes.
then comes, the appraisal. And what I'm noticing is that the buyers are ordering that appraisal a little bit later in the game than they were before.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's perfectly normal. I'm not a fan of it, but I understand why it happens, which is, we said that our contract says that a buyer can cancel if the appraisal can come in low. Well, the first part of the transaction process is the buyer's inspection period, and it's a period in which they can request repairs from the seller on the property. And if the two parties can't have a meeting of the minds on repairs, then the buyer can cancel and get their earnest money back. So the thought process is, well, I'm not going to, because you have to pay for that appraisal up front.
Right.
It's like $600 or something right now, right? So the thought process is, well, I'm going to make sure that we get through the inspection, negotiation first before I incur this other expense.
Right.
And so it comes late in the process a lot after, and the inspection process and negotiating repairs is often the most difficult part, from a human standpoint, of the entire transaction. and we get a meeting of the minds, and hopefully everybody's happy, relatively happy at that time, and then here we come with the appraisal. And so I understand why it's ordered late. If in a perfect world, if I had my druthers, I would say order this appraisal up front early. I know that money is at risk, but it's a cost of the process,
Right.
and get it done so that we're not visiting this so late in the process. But
Yeah, one of the downsides that we're seeing right now is a couple of years ago, FHA offers were not really getting a good look because there was an assumption there that the buyer was less qualified than someone who could go conventional. But as interest rates came up, then the interest rate on that FHA loan actually made it a better choice for the buyer to go FHA rather than conventional. And the loan requirements are different. So a little bit more stringent on the FHA side, and especially when it comes to condition of the home. And so for us, if we have an FHA buyer and they've delayed that appraisal because they want to get through the Binzer and make sure all the repair stuff is behind them, there may be FHA guidelines that require that appraiser to call out repairs.
Yes.
And so we've been through the repair process and we all think we're good. And then all of a sudden now an appraiser comes along. And so even if it appraises at value, they can say, but you need to change. And the most common things would be like, if you have a security door where there's a key required to exit the house, that is a safety issue. If you have a broken window or flaking paint on a home that is
Yep.
built at a time
And they
when
might
there
ask
was
for a roof certification.
yeah, so when we delay that appraisal, we now have a very short window to meet that appraiser's requirement. And so we're feeling a little pressure there on those delayed appraisals.
But thank goodness you guys have great agents in Ray Smith and Sandra Johnson at Indy Realty, also Danielle Johnson. We're part of the Johnson Smith team. You can get a hold of us at 520-904-7711 or at 520-850-1725 or 520-373-6864. We are the Johnson Smith team. You're here listening to the I Am Real Estate Show. We have Don Geisler, our designated broker from Indy Realty. We'll be back on the other side talking to you in a little bit. You are listening to the I Am Real Estate Show on KVOI The Voice, 1030. We have Don Geisler, who is the designated broker of Indy Realty, and also the CEO with him. And on his team is the Johnson Smith team, which includes Ray Smith, Danielle Johnson, and Sandra Johnson. So we're all happy to be here talking a little bit about real estate. We thought we'd finish up on appraisal. We had a couple more things you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something that we were talking about that, on a conventional, for the most part, on a conventional loan and the appraisal, the buyer has to qualify. The borrower has to qualify. And then when you go into government loans, VA and FHA, the buyer and the property have to qualify. So it's not normal on a conventional appraisal for the appraiser to come in and check and call out physical things, although it's not impossible. It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a specific and set checklist of physical items that the appraiser does check on the FHA and VA financing. So, and that goes to when you were saying, there's a time where FHA and unfortunately VA offers don't get as high consideration, because that's another thing that the seller is thinking about.
Right.
Is that, if I know that I have some peeling paint, even if the buyer's okay with it, the appraiser's not going to be okay with it. And so, the property has to qualify also.
I can tell you my first story dealing with the VA. What I didn't realize is what I didn't know anything about when I got into real estate is fascia boards.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you this, man, I'm not an expert on fascia boards, but I know when they're not going to.
You know to look up and
You
see
know
what
to look
condition
up.
they're in.
Every house I go to, I always look up fascia boards.
I have painted so many. So I'm not advocating for agents to be out there doing work, but I have painted so many fascia boards, eaves and soffits, and windowsills, in my real estate career in the blazing sun.
Yeah.
That it's pretty funny.
I just think I laugh about that because I'm like, I don't know the fascia board. It's not a big deal. After about your second or third transaction dealing with the FHA and VA, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I know that fascia boards are something we really need to look at. And because I want to make sure I get this right, could you just really try to explain what the fascia boards are as part of the house so people can know what we're talking about?
Yeah, just around the eave. It's typically like either 2x4 or a 2x6 that forms the outer edge of the house. Around the roof, and when those loans, when it's deteriorated from water or weather and the paint starts chipping and peeling and stuff like that, it is going to be called out by those appraisers, and it can be kind of expensive, believe it or not. So if it just needs to be painted, that's one thing. But if fascia boards and eaves and soffits have to be replaced because they're completely dry rotted,
Right.
then it gets to be a pretty significant expense. So you got to
And
be
usually
prepared for it.
there's a rough issue that's causing
Goes
that
along with it. Yeah.
to be damaged. It's
Right.
not going to just be, you don't have a perfect roof and then you have bad fascia boards.
Yeah.
It usually doesn't work that way. So something's contributing to that. So
Yeah, and all these things, and what you were saying, right, is when you first started, you're not aware, but now we go in to take a listing, and we're like, okay, if we're going to advertise that we're going to take a look at FHA and VA offers, we are experienced enough to go through and look around the house and at least get those things rectified ahead of time,
Right.
or at the very least, have the expectations for the seller set that these are going to have to be done. This appraiser is going to call out that your fascia is peeling or rotted.
My point about that, Don, is that you can really make a good impression upon your client when you know about that and you say it to them, and then after the inspection that happens, you're like, hey, we got through the inspection. Yeah, we sure did. But we still got to do the appraisal. And it goes through, and they said that, and they call out the fascia boards, and she's like, okay, or she's like, yeah, okay, but they have prepared for that. We have warned from that. And it's okay. Let's go ahead and get that done. And we're like, okay, thank you. But the point is that we are knowledgeable to tell them, hey, these are kind of things you need to worry about or think about, and
Absolutely.
we're preparing you for it. So if it doesn't happen, we all applaud. But if it does, you're
We
aware
know about
and
it.
we have a solution for it.
Yeah, we don't like surprises, and
Yes,
but
yes.
and there's no substitute for experience, and I can tell you that with the whole appraisal process. So we get back to just as simple as, it appraises low, and so it is so important to have an experienced agent advocating and in the middle of these transactions that know how to handle these things, because there are options, that we can do. We're back to a negotiation, and there are options that we can do that can satisfy the seller and the buyer. And so many times in my career, we had a low appraisal come in, and an agent would be like, oh, well, that's it, we're done.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, there are so many different avenues that we can exhaust, to make sure that to see if we can get this deal done to everybody's satisfaction.
Can we talk a little bit, since we're still talking about appraisals and about with the VA loan, about the Tidewater?
Yeah, Tidewater is, it's not a notification that you want to get. Like, it's not fun when you
No,
get that
it is not.
notification, but it is a benefit, because what Tidewater is the appraiser will give you notification ahead of time. Like, they did the appraisal and they're like, I'm not coming in at value, so I'm giving you an opportunity to send me the comps that you used, your thought process, why are you priced here? And it gives you an opportunity to try to support that value that you're at prior to the appraisal being completed and submitted.
Yes.
Because there's a big difference. When they tell you, because the other, it only exists for VA,
Right.
so, and it's a real benefit because once it's done and it's in print and it's out there and you don't like it, the answer, then trying to go to that appraiser and saying, we want you to change this appraisal because XYZ.
Right.
That's so much harder, and the success rate is so much lower.
Yeah.
And
So-
you really have to you can't just disagree and expect them to change the appraisal.
No, you have to have a
No.
You have to have
well-reasoned.
something really substantial that you can bring to them. And I think I've challenged one appraisal, and I said, hey, the house that you comped us to has polybutylene pipes. Ours are being replaced. And then there was something else with the house. I can't remember what it was. But clearly, we had a better home. And the cost of replacing those pipes was thousands of dollars. And when we got that reconsideration back, it actually appraised over asking price instead of falling under asking.
And that's wonderful.
But that's unusual.
It
That
is,
not
but
the
and
normal.
we can't always say we have that type of success. But again, that goes back to you have to be working with a great, top-notch professional like you, who knows what we're doing and how to best approach a challenge and an obstacle that comes up in a transaction like this, because the transactions are complicated,
Yes.
they are challenging, and they take a deft touch, and they take knowledge and experience.
Hey, thanks for staying with us. You're listening to the I Am Real Estate Show with Don Geisler, who's our guest today, is the designated broker and CEO of Indy Realty. You're listening to the I Am Real Estate with Ray Smith and Sandra Johnson. Danielle will be back later on, we hope. See ya. Thanks for hanging with us on the last segment. We're hoping you're having just as much fun as we are on the radio show today. We're having a great time today talking about Indy Realty and the things that are going on in real estate and appraisals. And we're going to talk something about reps. I'm going to let you talk first. Who's here? Guess who's here? It's Don Geisler. He's our CEO and designated broker of Indy Realty.
Hello.
You're on a radio show with Ray Smith and Sandra Johnson. Daniel Johnson's not here today. And we are the Johnson Smith team. We are brokerage at Indy Realty. It's 7255 East Tanga Verde, 85715. Yes, I got that right. Okay. I'll let Sandra start the conversation
Well,
about
we
wraps.
were just talking on the break about the fact that we're seeing a lot of wrap loans, which you want to go ahead and explain kind of the
Yeah, I
way
just
that
wanted
works.
to touch on it a little bit because I think it's relevant right now. And when interest rates rise in the way that they have, a wrap seems like a good way to go. And so what a wrap basically means is the existing loan on the property is not paid off, and the buyer sort of unofficially assumes it. Okay, and so there's a lot of different ways this can happen, but what a wrap is say you owe $200,000 on a house, I'm going to pay you $250,000, so I might give you the $50,000, and I just take over paying your loan. Okay, but there are some problems. These are the things that give our attorneys and AAR and brokers just nightmares, because most financing has what's called a due on sale clause in it, which means that if you transfer ownership of the property, the lender can foreclose on the property. So,
well, they would demand payment first,
yeah, so part of the foreclosure process
right?
is that they accelerate the balance and demand the balance, and if that doesn't happen, then they foreclose. So what happens is, we have this sale, and now the seller is out of the picture, and the title to the house actually transfers to the buyer, and now they're paying either directly to the existing lender or to a third party, or whatever, however we do it.
Right.
And there could, the reason it's called a wrap is there could be a second loan in place also. It's kind of wrapping around the first one. So I kind of don't want to get in the weeds on it, but I did want to point out that really talk to a real estate professional if you're considering doing these, because if you transfer ownership on your property, then your existing lender can call the note due.
And who owes the balance on that loan?
The seller. That's still going to be the seller who's now out of the picture, wants to be done with the property, but their credit, they're still the ones that are going to be pursued for it. And so there is a ton of liability. There are lots of things that can go wrong, so, and I don't know this to be the case, but from a speculative standpoint, a lender or a servicer may have more incentive now to foreclose, because people used to kind of say, well, as long as everybody makes the payments, nobody's going to say anything. Well, two things happen. First off, very often payments don't get made, because you have a buyer who decides, I hate to say this, right, but they decide they don't like the house or whatever, and the seller's the one that's on the hook for this debt. And they might just say, I'm not paying you anymore. Or there might be some sort of dispute. They move in and the roof leaks, and they blame it on the seller, and they decide they're not paying anymore. And so now
this could be an investor too.
It could
who's
be an
watching
investor.
late night TV and maybe not using their own money,
Yes.
wanting to build some equity or some wealth. So they may not be motivated
That's right.
to make that payment.
That's right. And it's going to fall on the seller. And so, as real estate professionals, it's not that we can't get deals done, but we make sure if we're going to do such a deal, we always suggest that people consult with an attorney, before we get into such a deal. We always use the appropriate disclosures to let them know what the risks are. And then if they choose to go forward, then, a buyer and seller have the right to do what they want. But we have to make sure that everybody's very educated and that they understand what the potential risks are. And, for anybody out there that's doing them, we certainly don't want to offend you. Like if you have a business model and it's working and you're doing it and you have all these things ironed out, it's fine. It's not illegal. It's perfectly legal, and it is a way to transfer property. So, by all means, just make sure that we are, explaining to everybody and know that like AAR, Rick Mack at AAR has done a couple Mac in a Minute videos about if you're going to get involved in a wrap, make sure that you have attorneys involved and do it appropriately.
Well, and this is different than assuming a loan, because we know a lot of loans that were done with these great interest rates were an assumable loan, and this is completely different than assuming someone's loan.
Yeah, and I don't know if I clarified that enough. It's when I say it's driven by interest rates, it's because the existing interest rate on the house might be 3%. And now they might be 7%. And so everybody's tempted to say, well, I'll just assume yours. But it's kind of an unofficial assumption of the loan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything unofficial when it comes to your finances or your assets. We want to make sure that you're protecting your interests.
In the world of real estate, there's something called change. Change is inevitable throughout life. You will always have change. And we'll talk a little bit about what's it called? The agreement that's
the buyer-broker agreement.
Buyer-broker agreement. I was thinking about the thing that caused the buyer-broker agreement to be
Yeah, so there is, as everybody knows, there have been antitrust lawsuits that have come about, and changes are coming to the way that the business is done. And out of all change, change is part of life and every business. So if you wake up every morning afraid of change, you're gonna have a rough life.
Bad days.
Yeah, because it's just what happens, right? So, but one of the things that are coming out of the settlement and the kind of the new way that business may be done in the future, for properties that are listed in an MLS, the rule is going to be you are required to have a representation agreement with an agent. Okay, so if I'm a buyer's agent and I'm going to show you some property, you have to have a representation agreement in place. Now, for us, we're kind of like, well, no kidding, because we've always used, an effective buyer representation agreement because it's very transparent. It explains to buyers how we're compensated, what our duties are, what their responsibilities are, and it's a very good document for transparency. But it is going to become rule that you have to have a signed agreement to see properties. So we do want buyers to be aware that this document is coming, and it clarifies. It can create the contractual relationship between you and your agent, but it also clarifies how the agent is compensated and other important items.
Yeah, to me, the main reason for this is for you to sit and have understanding before you step out of your house or into the next house or go and look for something, what you can expect from your agent. Understanding that just like any other industry, everybody gets paid for what they do. And so there is a price that comes with having an agent. And just like you having a lawyer, there's a price to come for having a lawyer. The only ones you don't have a price for point, as I say, is a car dealer, but you're paying for them eventually. You just don't see it.
Well, and I think that transparency, you can't go wrong having more and more and more transparency.
Yes.
And like I said, for us, this is not a shock because we've always used effective buyer-broker agreements. And I feel like our buyers who work with Indie Realty have always known exactly how we're compensated, how the funds flow, how they're affected, what the impact is on them, all of it. And I feel very comfortable that nobody is surprised or has a lack of understanding. But this document has never been required, quote unquote.
Right.
And so us, as people who do use it, we've dealt with people coming in from different markets, different states, and we put the document down in front of people, and it'd be like, I've never seen such a. I've bought 50 houses in my life, and I've never seen such a thing.
I'm not signing that.
Yeah, so I think it's very important. I think it's a good thing that it will nationally be the expectation that if you're going to view a house that's listed on MLS, that you have to sign this document, knowing how everybody's compensated, among other things, and what agency means and how agency is established. So it'll be a good thing, but the word has to get out that people should expect it.
Yeah, and it's going to be either specific to that one particular house, to a state or part of town. It could be for a short amount of time, or it could be for an extended amount of time. So you really need to know what you're signing, because you could be obligating yourself to pay a commission on a house that if you sign more than one of these, it could get really expensive.
Very clear, and you have to have very good, clear conversations with clients.
Yes.
If you're a client, you have to have a clear conversation with your agent and understand what your responsibilities are. But everything is in the interest of increasing transparency, and I think this is a very, very good change that's coming down the pipe.
We want to thank Don Geisler, who is their designated broker for Indy Realty and also the owner of Indy Realty, located at 7255 East Tango Verde. Don, how does an agent or a client who's looking to hire Ray Smith or Sandra Johnson get a hold of you?
If people would like to reach me, the designated broker, Don Geisler, my number is 520-869-2376. Always available. Love taking calls from buyers, sellers. Also, we are always looking to add great real estate agents to our team. So again, I'm Don, 520-869-2376.
How big has the company grown since last time we talked, Don?
We're in growth mode. We are bumping up right around 35 agents right now, and we're in massive growth mode right now. So it's just fantastic time.
I just want people to know that we're an amazing industry.
Yeah, we have a wonderful culture that we can't say enough good about. Matter of fact, you can call us and just ask us about what it's like to work there if you're an agent and you're thinking about making a move. And with that, we'd like to wrap up the show. We want to thank Indy Realty, Inspired Life Mortgage, Rego Pest Prevention, Pioneer Title Agency, and Pillar to Post Home Inspection. And if you use one of our sponsors, please let them know that you heard about them on the I Am Real Estate Show.